Fantastic. A couple of things just before we start the round. I am going to be sharing my screen with a stopwatch, so that way everyone is able to. A couple of things just before we start the round. First and last have been reached within the speech. If not, then we're just going to go with the stopwatch. So I'm going to assume that everyone's going to look at the screen. Great. 1 moment, we can get that set up. Okay. Before you go to give your speeches, you should tell your opponents what sorts of POIs you prefer. Do you prefer like having someone's hand up to the screen? People tend to have different preferences based on whether or not they're going to be looking at their computer screen most of the time. When you're referring to me, I use she, her pronouns, but also since we have a panel of judges, it's probably preferable to refer to us as a panel rather than pair or anything. Certain things that they want to. If not, a speaker from side opposite.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, just a second. And get my timer because I'm not going to see the screen. Can you hear me now as well, right? Okay, cool. Just a second. I'd like audible PYs, please. Okay. Two defendants who both pleaded guilty to armed robbery on the same day. The same judge sentenced them to 2 and respectively 26 years in prison. One of them is white and one of them is African American. On team proposition, we stand against that. What we stand for is the same punishment for the same crime. Teams construct. Firstly, this motion refers to sentencing. Sentencing is the process of deciding the punishment after the guilty verdict was established. Look, sentencing guidelines already exist, but punishment as long as they respect the broad ranges of years for each specific crime. This creates the largest problem in the justice system, that we do not deal the same justice for all. Secondly, we propose an algorithm that follows the exact sentencing guidelines. Note, this is not the self-learning artificial intelligence. This is a simple algorithm that inputs the data and applies the instructions that we provide. So within the range prescribed, the algorithm will take into consideration only the objective information that it can quantify. For example, if your employer was planned to receive 5 more years to your sentence. Mitigating circumstances, if you stole something but you are poor, you'll receive 5 months less. Also, your criminal record will be included. For example, if you're a second-time offender, you surely will get a higher punishment. 3 notes here. Firstly, we are more than happy to eliminate any subjective factors from the trial. Aspects such as remorse will still be a part of a sentence, but only if they can be quantified on objective grounds. For example, through actions. Pleading guilty shows us that you took responsibility for your crime, so we'll quantify them. If after all the calculation there's still range that algorithm remains with, we will choose the average punishment. See, note that the sentencing guidelines are already in place, and this is how the system of justice guides itself by. They are designed by a civil society, by law experts, by algorithmic experts, and will be subject to democratic and institutional control and accountability. 3 main arguments presented by team proposition in today's debate. Firstly, about how human judgment makes sentencing unjust. Secondly, about how judges have biases the value. And thirdly, my second speaker will present you an argument regarding why addressing systemic issues in the justice system is easier on our side of the house. Before I move on to my first argument, is there any point? If there isn't, I'll move on to my first argument. Look, human judgment isn't compatible with a fair sentence. Look, the basic promise of the justice system is to provide equal justice for all. This means that each defendant is entitled to know that they will get the same punishment as other defendant gets for the same crime in similar circumstances. This means factors which are out of the defendant's control shouldn't be considered. That the defendant should know that it's not a matter of luck that they get a fair sentence, it's a matter of what they did and they deserve that. Now, regardless of how well we design the system, it is fundamentally polluted by human judgment, and it breaks this fundamental promise of equality for three main reasons. Firstly, because judges are humans, and humans are the sum of their personal experience. For example, the method in which you were raised sets you with a certain set of beliefs. Growing up in a Christian conservative family might mean that you've been taught that one has to be punished very thoroughly for their wrongdoings. Therefore, this judge will be harsher in the sentence. But a more progressive judge might look at the implications of imprisonment as well and might give you a lower sentence because they believe that isolationism is. Second reasons, judges are emotional. Judges whose children were involved in drug-related offenses and had a problem with drugs, it means that they will give a harsher sentence. Other judges will be more liberal. A person who cries in court might appeal a more, but another judge might not be convinced because they think they are faking. Also, a judge asking a victim of violent crime will maximum sentence. Burglar. Anyone else would probably understand that sometimes when you don't have that much money, you resort to this sort of actions. So the same intent from the defendant is getting significantly responses from the judges. We believe this is a miscarriage of justice.
Yes, mentioned judges are emotional. But which is the true intent of the justice system. So how is this the justice system when judges are now following the fundamental principle of justice by going in line with the statute?
I get your point. Thank you. Look, the reason is judges are emotional and you the system, but you can't tell an act in front of the judge and how they really feel. So all that you assume that is emotion on your side of the house is just an assumption that judges make based on what they see. That they might be wrong because that person might be faking it. That person emotional. We're only based yourself on a feeling. Now, as long as human judgment is present, every small factor can influence the systems. This is systemic and this is inherent to humans. And it is so random that it's based regarding of how this is unrepairable. Two impacts here. Firstly, it is a huge miscarriage of the justice system because it fails on its promise of providing equal justice. And secondly, it leads to less trust in the justice system. On our side of the house, only and then for them and that is law equally. Second argument about how judges have biases that fundamentally disadvantage the vulnerable. Look, a Stanford swimmer raped an unconscious girl at a party. No, thank you. He could have faced up to 14 years in prison. It was clear he fought, and the promise of Polish Olympic medal was more important than justice and this young woman's bodily autonomy. Look, trends are not in the favor of the disadvantaged. We live in a society with cultural biases, and this which might typically raise or be the mass majority of judges have unconscious biases as well, which means that they refer to stereotypes when giving out a sentence. They might see a black man as dangerous. They might see an attractive woman guilty because she charmed her rapist. And this, let's see how the algorithm is different on our side of the house. A, it doesn't associate the individual with certain type of stereotypes. It has no personal experience. B, it doesn't make any logical errors because it's a calculator and it's based on a mathematical formula. And thirdly, it's not delusional. It doesn't think that women consented to rape. It's not a white supremacist that thinks one minority is inferior over another. At the end of the day, panel, only if we take out human judgment in sentencing can we truly achieve fair justice the same punishment for the same crime.
Okay, just checking in that everybody is still connected. Looks like we haven't lost anyone. Great. With that, I thank the first proposition speaker for their speech and welcome up the first speaker of side opposition to deliver their own.
I prefer taking people by audio. Panel. All we got from Team Proposition's first speech will be summarized in one phrase: exacerbation of the status quo. Panel, it is important to note that the opposition team has misrepresented the issues in the status nature of Justicia is a popular symbol with all a blindfolded lady with a sword in her hands, a two-stroke skill in the other, but that listens and feels before she condemns. This is what we represent on our side of the earth manufactured by man. A few responses to proposition. First, proposition said human judges are biased. Now, this is wrong because as we're going to prove in today's debate, we propose administrative judges who will then replace these algorithms, and whatever assessment that they do will be sent to the actual judges in the court, and that particular assessment will be checked to ensure there is no bias and there is no inconsistency. She further argued again that judges are emotional. Now, forgetting to know that emotion is a key point in the justice system. It cannot be detached. This is because Lady Justicia proved that she is blind, but she can hear and she can feel. So before you sentence somebody, you should listen to what they have to say, the condition under which they committed the crime. Unlike in proposition world, our side provide a more efficient way of serving justice in accordance with due process of law, and the most effective mechanism to avoid bias. Side opposition proposes a counter model to better solve the problem we see in the status quo. Primary efficiency in the delivery of justice for all. In our model, we propose a system of administrative judges with similar criteria as regular judges. Regular judges are the ones who are already in the status quo, who are specifically designated to interview convicts and provide assessment to regular judges for criminal sentencing rather than using computer algorithms. More of these judges means speedier trials will increase as more judges are available to in the sentencing process. We'll also invest in the expansion of more specialized courts for the purpose of due process, which is speedy trial. Why is our side better? Because on our side, we have human attachment and intuition that give convicts the best due process they deserve. For if a working from a supermarket and a young lady in a supermarket will thank you to impress a lady out of five, they have both been convicted under which they both broke the law. Unlike proposition, who will subject them to both machine assessment and solicit same responses in an assessment that does not we will ensure that these interviews conducted by administrative judges are subject to legal review in order to have okay, oh, no, thank you, and they are in your own issue to computer algorithm. In our world, these administrative judges regular judges for sentencing So using the regular justice and providing speedy justice for all, along with the experts, oppose this motion because it exerts hope that it is counterproductive to due process of law. Two arguments to why we thank you. Why the algorithms are not effective in solving the problem it starts. One, algorithms. And I'll be the of schools allocated to questionnaires. Two, how this system undermines due process mode. I will discuss the biased nature of computer algorithms, prove why they're inherently biased in the questions, and highlight the effects of proprietary calculation of scores allocated to questionnaires. My second talk will discuss how the usage of computer algorithms undermines due process mode. I'll take it later. My third speaker will do extensive reporters, we build our argument, and we compare the analysis. The biased nature of computer algorithms. Inherent bias in questions. These algorithms disregard the subjective nature of defendants by assuming they are all from the same culture, families, and ethnicities. As a result, all the questionnaires in the algorithms will strictly apply to everyone. This will be wrong, considering not exist in homogeneous society anywhere on earth. Therefore, there will be a need to do with people considering their upbringings, histories, and ethnicity. Questions might even be influenced to target on specific beauty questionnaires will lead to the following backlashes. One, algorithms will now be programmed with questionnaires for specific races or ethnicity, thereby leading to a particular race getting more scores on certain questions and the others having less. Two, as a result, the inherent bias in this algorithm increase. There is a potential possibility to target certain race or ethnic groups are taken away. For example, a poor population study found that Cuba has black defendants would have higher risk of recidivism than they actually do. And what is then they actually do? If there are any POI, I can set them.
Don't confuse our model with any current algorithm. We're not proposing an AI, we're proposing a simple mathematical formula that only looks at objective factors. It doesn't look at patterns.
Okay, I understand. Justice system is not based on mathematics. Therefore, you cannot use mathematics to judge the justice system. People need to use their intuition, their intelligence, their sense of feeling in regards to the statute of justice. Therefore, mathematics cannot be a basis to exist in the justice system. Secondly, algorithms carry out proprietary calculation of questionnaires and just throw the weight on different defendants who answered yes to a question without probing further to prove why these yeses were warranted the same score. For example, two defendants, a master degree holder who stole milk for his baby to survive on the middle of the night, and a serious rapist whose intention is to a question asked, would you still recommit this crime? The master degree holder clicks yes, and the algorithm does not probe further to know why yes. On the other hand, the serial rapist answers yes too. Automatically, these two candidates receive the same weight for the question without a justification. This is wrong because the algorithm devoids the emotional benefits of human compassion, relating to another human in judicial hearing, considering necessity, and this undermines the true intent of the justice system. And defendants won't be which will train comparable recidivism data into their system. From that, the program asserting one factor tend to make a defendant at higher risk. Because we have been able to put our shifting sentencing responsibility to the computer does not limit the bias for only the finalists. Because we stand on the side of due process for all conflicts. I'm so proud.
Okay, checking in once more, just to make sure no one's dropped off over the course of that speech. Looks like we're all good. I thank the first opposition speaker for their speech, and I welcome up the second speaker side of the opposition.
Can you hear me? Is it fine? I prefer if your eyes were good audibly. And with that, I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Wiley Mays Aikens received a sentence of 21 years for selling crack cocaine to an undercover police officer. It was later found out that the sentence should have been 14 years according to sentencing guidelines. Those are 7 years more because the judge had judiciary discretion. If he would have been assigned another judge, he would have gotten out 7 years early. The difference is what OP needs to defend. The difference is what OP justifies through judges understand emotion. We believe this can never be justified with the judge's discretion. We believe that for the same crime, you should receive the same punishment in all judges, in all offenders. Secondly, on this, then I'll attack the point about emotion, how emotions are necessary. I'll further our case and I'll have my own argument. How addressing systemic issues in the judicial system is easier on our side. First, about a counter model. We can basically boil it down to having more judges in the panel. We don't understand how these administrative judges are fundamentally different from the judges we have today. They never explain that. We just believe they're going to be the same judges. And we have multiple problems with this. First of all, notice all of the argumentation we had on first are flawed on the first argument. It's about how humans in themselves are flawed, how humans make logical fallacies, how they're too emotional. We believe that these administrative judges will suffer from the exact same thing. So they don't solve much with this. But moreover, we have a problem with how they're going to get more judges out of the blue and how they're going to reach a consensus regarding the sentencing. They never explain this. We believe that the process is going to be more complicated, harder to achieve a proper sentence. So what this means is that they don't change much when it comes to all the biases and all the problems about humans that we talked about on the first speech, but they also create a worse system that is more. Let's see some can work somehow. How does it interact with the problems that we've presented? Because we presented two main problems in our first speech. First, we talked how there was a discrepancy between judges that give different sentences. Well, it doesn't matter whether the sentence is good or not. It matters that if I go to one judge that is more emotional, I will get a low sentence. If I go to another judge that is, I'll get a higher sentence. This discrepancy in itself is pretty severely unjustified, and it's not solved by having more judges. The judges still have different opinions. It is only solved when you have second problem. You don't have biases that come from the fact that you see the person directly, and this doesn't happen in the algorithm because the algorithm is applied like Lady Justice they like to talk about so much. So we're telling you that this problem also doesn't disappear just by increasing the number of judges, specifically because all of those judges still have all of their biases. That is not solved. The countermodel fails on both the problems we have on the first speech. No, thank you. But let me clarify our model for a bit, because this is very important. Most of their argumentation is based on are not proposing. We're not proposing AI, we're not proposing machine learning, we're not proposing some questions, things that they're talking about. We believe that they're just scared of technology. What we are proposing is an automation of the sentencing guidelines that exist right now. What does this mean? That we take objective information about the context and about the offender. About the context, things like, did your offender do the crime at night because he wanted to hide from public view? Did your offender plan the crime in advance? Notice, very objective, and things that already exist in the sentencing guidelines. We're just writing them down in an algorithm. Moreover, we take information about the offender to help the victim after the crime. Yes, that means they actually show remorse, which is very important because we can reduce their sentence. Did they confess to the crime? Yes, perfect. That means we can cut a third of the sentence because this is what the sentencing guidelines are telling us that we should do. So tell me that this is an improvement we have on our side, and that sort of interacts with most of the argumentation about judges' bias, about the algorithms is biased, and how there are going to be skewed questions. There are no questions, there are no biases, there are very objective things. But even if there were, I will explain later about that. Lastly, about how emotions are necessary in the process. First of all, we believe that if objectively assessed, we would rather not have in the process at all, because we believe that we should have objective, provable information, such as whether or not the person tried to help the victim or not. This is provable. Whether the offender feels remorse or not cannot just be assessed by the judge, because if our algorithm can't assess whether or not the person felt remorse, that means that a judge probably can't either, because the judge can't guess what emotion the other person is feeling. Moreover, there's an important distinction that side opposition fails to make. We definitely don't need the emotions of the judge when it comes to that process, because the moment that the judge puts his emotional input, that's when you get biased, that's when you get skewed results. The more judicial autonomy this person has, the more likely it is that their emotions will intervene in the process and they will make the results worse. With that, I'll an argument before that, sure.
What do you think to make of judges if you're replacing them with algorithms? What becomes the role of the judging court?
They will give the verdict. They will establish guilt. We believe that this is significantly easier to do. Most judges get it right. It's kind of hard to say it's kind of easy to say if the person is guilty or not. It's very easy to prove. But the debate is played when it comes to sentencing, because there are massive differences in sentencing. You can get between 6 and 16 years. This is where the debate is played, because we're playing with people's lives. This is why we want to have a system that is as accurate as possible, as less biased as possible. This is why we want. So my argument. This argument deals with systemic issues that might appear in the system, such as skewed laws or a sentencing guideline that might not be perfect. Notice, there is an important thing here. The reason most injustices happen in the judicial system is because of judges. This has already been the first speech and the rest of my second speech. We believe this is done with. So let's talk about systemic issues, or maybe some biases in the algorithm. If that exists, let's take opposition at your best. So how do we address that on our side? What we're going to do is that first we're going to find out about the issue faster, because now that we don't have judges that give their sentence on arbitrary criteria that only they know, that means it's easier for us to understand the causality between what the person did and the sentence they got. Which means that, for example, if a black drug dealer is put in prison for a longer time, we see that the common denominator between all black drug dealers is that they're carrying a gun, and this is an aggravating circumstance. But because of the terrible neighborhoods in which they live, they usually have to carry that gun for self-defense. This doesn't mean they deserve a harsher sentence, so we shouldn't give them one. So compare that to their side, where they don't know why the judge gave their decision. Sentencing is generally not explained, and even in the cases where it is, judges don't always follow the guidelines. So first, we find out about the issues faster. But secondly, there are instant implementation fixes, because all you have to do is add, remove, or change a sentencing guideline, which happens immediately through public pressure. They can't tell a judge to change the way they do things. Easily change the democratic accountability in the judicial system. Thirdly, even if we miss some criteria or there is some bias, we can change that on the long run. Thus, we
All right, just checking. Still looks like everybody is here, unless I'm mistaken. With that, I invite up the second speaker of side opposition to deliver their remarks.
Thank you. Hello.
Not only that, the risk of using computer algorithms during criminal sentencing outweighs the benefit, but it has proven to be extremely problematic. Computer maybe a few reasons. Second speaker has already contradicted the motion when he mentioned that they are not referring to computers. The motion is actually saying that we should allow this computer algorithm sentencing when it comes to court judgments. Side proposition also mentioned that judges are biased, but what we mentioned is on our side that judges are emotional. That was one of the points they also mentioned. Side proposition said that judges are biased on our side and they face the problems because they are able to subject to judicial review. But actually proposed a model that states that administrative judges should be specifically assigned only for criminal sentencing. That itself reduces the burden on the regular judges and provide a space for legal review in the case of business. We need the institution because further to solicit petitions are not reviewed and they do not take oath that holds them accountable for their actions given. Now, this takes me to rebuilding our council model that was stated clearly because we propose a system of administrative judges with similar criteria as regular judges who are certainly in the status quo, who are specifically designated to interview, convict, and provide assessments to regular judges for criminal sentencing rather than using computer algorithms. More of these judges means speedy will increase as more judges are available to assist in sentencing processes. Panel, it is important to note that the use of computer algorithms doing criminal sentencing, as we currently see in the status quo, is very primarily information regarding the algorithm used to compete scores. 2. The offender rights to know why these scores are. So there are several arguments is how undermine you kind of citizen under the law, most especially procedural due process, which aims to ensure fairness in legal proceedings that place life, liberty, or property at risk. It requires that a person is fully represented at every step of criminal procedures, access information about their sentencing, and is fully protected by the state in keeping the law. It is a law that cares, but it condemns. When algorithm-based risk assessment tools are used in criminal proceedings, due process issues can arise with respect to offenders' rights to challenge the accuracy and relevance of information used as sentencing. Nice. How the judgment to increase his or her sentence was readdressed as a requirement for due process of law. The proprietary nature of computer algorithms remains dependent on the specific validity of assessment. Secondly, the offender's right to know what his or her scores are. Because computer algorithms could discriminate against certain groups as those who live in particular zip codes and those who are with no longer arrest history. Therefore, inputting historically biased data into these models contributes to perpetrating of bad data because the algorithm uses each new case as a reference for the next. I will take any POI if there are any from the other proposition too.
We are not sure what scores you're actually talking about, but we believe it's easier for you to ask a list of all the mitigating and all the aggravating circumstances on your side, rather than understand all the judges' complicated thinking on your side of the house.
Repeat, please.
On our side, you could ask for a list of all the aggravating and all the mitigating circumstances that led to the sentence. On your side, how could they understand what the judge's thinking process was?
Okay, so the issue here is this algorithm information that our process cannot be disclosed, and that's by means the why and the how is not provided by these algorithms. Yeah?
Continue.
Judge. Sorry, I had internet connectivity issues. Was I being heard?
We were on the approximately the past 20 seconds. You said that.
So could you please repeat my last point?
The last thing I have is the POI that was asked in Romania.
Okay, thank you. Proceeding to the question, why is this wrong? Algorithms might award score to a person based on their histories, race, etc., and not what they truly scored, which is prejudicial. This is wrong because judges must give reasons for their most important actions, such as sentencing. When an algorithm scoring process is kept secret, it is impossible to challenge key aspects of it. 3, because each of these inquiries is crucial to 2 core legal principles: due process and the ability of meaningful appeal and adverse decision, and once an offender is denied access to them, no thank you. It is no different from evidence provided by an evidence offered by an anonymous source which cannot be cross-examined. Now to re-emphasize our counter model to this motion. Our counter model clearly stated that in our world we offer a system of administrative judges with similar criteria as regular judges, who are specifically designated to interview convicts and provide assessments to regular judges rather than you. So able to prove how our counter model is more efficient by making it clearly administrative judges will be assigned specifically to interview convicts and report scores to regular judges for sentencing, thus reducing the burden for regular judges and providing more speedy justice for all. Because side proposition has proven that computer algorithms undermine the process.
All right, once again, just doing a brief pause to check. Looks like we are all good. I thank the second opposition speaker for their remarks, and I invite the third speaker from side proposition.
Am I audible? Our algorithm is neither wise nor intelligent. We never claim that. It's just a computerized form of sentencing guidelines. Let me be more clear if you think that my previous 2 speakers didn't make it clear enough. I think they did. The verdict with sentences guidelines work as the word of crime is settled. So let's say it's drug possession. So the algorithms find that category crime, drug possession, which is sentenced between 2 and 5 years, let's say, of imprisonment time. Let's say it starts from the middle between the 2 months and 5 years. Great. Now, the algorithm looks at the case and it identifies that the individual immediately recognizes the police that possess drugs that inflict the whole. Food research. That's clearly a mitigating circumstance. Extraction of the years that the sentence receives. It doesn't analyze any previous data. It does not self-learn onto anything. It does not look at the background of the individual. It only looks at the objective facts of the case. We think this is extremely clear, and thus any argumentation from team opposition, which is most of their constructive case, is not valid in this debate. They have prepped for an intelligent, artificial intelligent algorithm. We didn't model that. We can model it how we want. Having that in mind, we think this is quite clear, and we think this literally just proves how there's no bias, how it doesn't look at any personal problems, and so on. Let's speak about their counter model. The first issue that we have is that it's literally physically impossible. Even if they have the political capital to implement their model, it's physically impossible to have that are and to in the new system. We simply do not have that many people. We don't have the resources to. No country ever did that, and I think most countries want to have a better situation. Is that the arguments we have said? So we don't think they have on their side of the house. We clearly eliminate the problem. Having that settled, let's go into it. The team continuously to us, and it's basically the main that they have is that emotions are relevant, and they keep pushing this idea to us, but they never explain. Let me unpack it for you. We think if you look at the trial, the funniest thing is how a judge comes up to the offender and says, well, the judicial instance appreciates that the punishment should be 3 years. The key word is appreciates, because all this subjectivity and discretion clear calculus. The problem is that most instances, these emotions are translated only into hunches, into instincts that the judges feel like the offender showed remorse. They feel like if they're a good guy, we should be lenient, but they're never objective. We are very. We think that even if they were representative of the reality, they are not communicated right, because the offender might simply be a bad person at expressing their emotions. We think that in an instance of a sexual assault victim, the simple fact that they are very emotionally distressed, the fact that they see their abuser, their voice might look like they are not telling truth because their voice cracks and they're not coherent. But the judge will simply just trust the ignorant and the ignorant abuser, which is confident in their story. These are all just random hunches that we don't want to exist. For every single, so even if they're good, the problem is that they're not communicated right. And even if the offender communicates them right, the perception of the judge is still based on their subjective emotions, and it's still distortionate. The problem is that, okay, maybe in the cases of like a white privileged rich guy that is going to university and that swears their story and they have a good lawyer, the story might be understood by the judge. The problem is that because they have prejudice and they have biases behind. So analysis. But now let's go to the whole case, which was mainly left unrebutted by team opposition. The main thing we have explained is that there are intrinsic problems in the human judgment, even if we are not speaking about biases or societal problems. These are, even in a perfectly non-racist society, these problems still exist. What am I speaking about? My first speaker explained how judges come from different personal contexts, how the current mood of a judge, the values they believe in, lead into a different flawed calculus of the sentencing. We think that besides that, that's gambler's fallacy. A judge minimum 6 case, they will intentionally be more harsh because they're thinking, oh, I've been too lenient. I gave five in a row worth to lenient. Before I move on here.
In your model, you say that you provide objective information in the algorithm. Now, these imports in the algorithm are from humans. Human are programmed by the same human beings.
They're programmed, but they're programmed to be objective. Just explain how they're programmed. I'm not going to do it the 4th time in this debate. The ultimate impact of this point, and our crucial impact, was uniformity in sentencing. Because, for instance, in the US, we've had 3 teenagers that stole a car. 2 of them two of them were caught by the police. 1 of them escaped and robbed some gas stations further, and for another 3 months they were chased by the police. The problem is that they had the same background, the same criminal record, and the problem is that they were judged by different judges. The 2 people that did less criminal offenses received 3 years imprisonment. The other person received only parole. There was nothing different, just more offenses done to the person that received a more lenient punishment. The only difference was that 2 different human beings judged it. Judges can't manage to have the same sentence for the same punishment. This is what we stand for on team proposition, and we think that even at team opposition's best case scenario, they have never explained how this could be achieved on their side of the house. Thus, this is a very important, unique benefit that stops the miscarriages of justice that happen at the moment.
Okay, I thank the 3rd speaker of side proposition for their remarks, and I welcome up the 3rd speaker of side opposition.
If you can trust the product, you can also trust the manufacturer even more. Daniel, through the proposition speech in this debate, we have not had adequate responses to 3 major issues in this debate. 1, the lack of individualization in computer algorithm, which is a fundamental requirement of due process. 2, the absence of transparency under trade secret claims. My second speaker explained that when offenders are denied access to their tools, the possibility of biasness is huge. 3, the true impact of these computer algorithms Before I go further, I'd like to make 3 responses to team proposition's case. Team proposition first speaker mentioned that human sentence is unjust and there will be bias in the system. We can fix that problem because we are able to subject them to judicial review. On the other hand, computer algorithms do not give reason for sentencing their actions and their actions are not reviewed, and they do not take oath that hold them accountable. On the other hand, administrative judges on our side of the house will be specifically assigned only for criminal sentencing that itself reduces the burden on regular judges and provide a space for legal review in case of bias. We need the institution to test as we does with criminal sentencing, unlike algorithms that solicit response only from yes or no questions. Daniel, why should we test a system or capacity to impose sentencing but cannot explain the why and how? Why should we trust a system that has the ability and capacity to impose sentencing but cannot explain the how and the why? As two panel of adjudicators, side proposition mentioned that the administrative judges will be biased, which my first speaker addressed and I just re-echo. Two, I'd like to remind side proposition of today's motion.
Ma'am?
Getting me? Hello? Hello? Are you getting me?
We didn't hear you for the past 10-15 seconds.
Sorry, so what's the last word that you hear from me, please?
You left off by saying proposition must be reminded of today's motion, and then I wasn't able to hear anything else. If someone didn't hear that or heard things after that, please let me know.
Thank you. I'd like to remind you of the motion. The motion states, this House will replace human judgment with computer algorithms in criminal sentencing. Sentencing is something that takes place after a judgment call has been made, right? So, if this House will replace human judgment with computer algorithms, how can side proposition come to this debate and contradict the entire motion by telling us that they are not referring to computers? Ladies and gentlemen, yes, I'll take you.
Yeah, so we are using computers that have a simple automated algorithm that works on the basis of sentencing guidelines. We are not contradicting the motion. Let that be very clear. So yes, we are using computers that are using an algorithm which simply automates sentencing guidelines. We are not contradicting the motion.
Algorithms have historical data already posted in them. Let me give you an example that my first and second speaker mentioned. Firstly, let's take that as a case study. A person is from a ghetto zone. This ghetto zone is populated by criminals. And this person commits a first-time offense and he's brought to the court of law. In this, you see that this person will receive higher scores even though it's a first-time offense because their records in the algorithm system of high crime rate from his zone. They panel of adjudicators, algorithm scores are not disclosed. I don't know how side proposition is actually taking the rule. Please, no. Today, we oppose this motion, the bias in the status quo, and that it is counterproductive to the House pulls there a way that is better. Outside the House has human attachment, an institution that gives conflict the best due process. Our side offers the best for preventing bias, unlike computer algorithms, whose might not be subjected to legal review because of the proprietary nature of these assessments. We ensure that the interviews are conducted by administrative judges. On efficiency, we are very efficient because outside of the house have administrative judges who will be assigned specifically to interview COVID and report codes. I think
so even if you manage to solve our racism, please interact with our main point, which explain uniformity in the house, because judges
come again.
So even if racism isn't something in our society, we have still explained that uniformity is our main goal in the justice, and we don't achieve that because judges are inherently different. How do you respond to that?
Okay, thank you, sir. We don't need uniformity. We need appropriate decisions that will relate to our crime. And we mentioned that if we don't bias, even if biases arise, there will be able to fix this problem because what we do. We are not looking for uniformity. On the other hand, we need justice to prevail. Thank you. I hope that answers your questions. Panel, throughout this debate, from our model up to requirements in which we gave you, the outside of the house is better.
All right, quick check for all participants and judges. Looks like we're all good. I'd now like to welcome up the opposition reply speaker to close out the op case for this round.
First, in today's debate, side proposition about a model their algorithm will have those objective questions can't be trusted. Now, how can you and I that is not trust the same algorithms? Ask a matter. The same individuals who produce algorithms, they do not have judicial criteria to show that they understand the actual intent of the judging today. We have few clashes. The first clash was one. Judges are biased and judges are not biased. The second clash in this debate is that which house would ensure a more justifiable world, a world where perfect sentence today. Some proposition also on the issue of emotion. And how did we win on this issue? We won on this issue because we were able to prove that emotional benefit is a key principle in the justice system. Because as we mentioned in our first argument, it is tied down to the fundamental issue. This implies that the lady is blind, but she can feel, she can hear. So that implies the system should consider the intent under which the crimes were committed, not to just sentence the crime. We give the example on the border who stole a milk in the middle of the night for his baby to survive, and another individual who stole wine just to impress his girlfriend. In this situation, these two individuals went to the algorithm, and the algorithm the master degree was informed father to know why he will repeat this crime. The individual who stole the wine also said yes, but the algorithm did not probe why you will repeat this crime. Automatically, they both are rendered the same sentence. If it is 50 years, they go to prison for 50 years. That is wrong because judges should be the one who will understand most of the defendants already not do what they are doing. And they also argued on this point that convicts will be so emotional, they would lie, and this will make the justice system flawed. This is a misrepresentation of the fact because we were effectively able to prove that administrative judges will be working in line with those judges who are already in the judicial system. This means whatever assessment they make on convicts, that particular assessment is going to be forwarded to the judges, the head judge of the court. That particular head judge now will review to identify the why and the how certain questions carry higher rates. The algorithms cannot do that because they do not have the capacity to ensure that is effectively done. They also prove that, they also try to argue in our world, we cannot prove how the justice system will be better. We do not have resources to employ more administrative justice. Point of information is the justice system is not built on monetary policy. The justice system is to ensure that every individual has access to free, fair trial. And we're able to prove that algorithms cannot provide due process of law because they do not ask why. The information they have is not disclosed. Therefore, defendants do not know why they are sentenced for this. But human judges can prove the how and the why. Side position has this debate because we're able to prove that these algorithms cannot fully execute due process, they deprive individuals, and there is no way the system will improve, but it will only increase the situation of bias that exists in the status quo. On our side, we will be able to change it because administrative judges work closely with those in the judicial system to ensure that all of this is not seen. With this, we have won this debate and so proud to.
Okay, looks like everybody is still here. I welcome up the proper reply.
Can you guys hear me? Is it fine? Okay. There are three avenues through which we win this debate. First, equality in front of the law. Second, racism and bias. Third, long-term change. But before any of that, I want to address some of the argumentation and the counter model they have provided. Because we explained how their alternative with having more judges is virtually impossible since there's probably not enough resources for that. But even so, let's take for opposition at their best. They don't prove why they solve the intrinsic human biases that we have the fact that those which create discrepancies. They didn't prove why all of these intrinsically human things disappear. But what they did is that they kept misrepresenting our model by talking about how the due process, which was their second argument, is not okay because we have some scores. Or their first argument, which was entirely reliant on some questions that this algorithm is going to have. Where are the scores in our model? Where are the questions? We never introduced them. We never talked about them. This is not our model, guys. What are we actually proposing? An algorithm that takes objective information about the context and the offender, which also means that most of the argumentation about how we don't understand the context also falls. And we explain in like 3 speeches. The fact that we take mitigating and aggravating circumstances, whether you did the crime at night or not, objective and very easily accessible. Whether you planned the crime or not, objective, very easily accessible. Whether you tried to help the victim afterwards, or what were your motivations, whether you did it because you were hungry. Very objective, very easily quantifiable, very easy to put in a computer algorithm that is based on sentencing guidelines. This our model is clear, and we believe that since most of the argumentation was based on a different model that we didn't propose, they lose on their own points. So let's see what we have provided. First, we have equality in front of the law. Notice we explained from the second speech how the countermodel can't solve this. This is an intrinsic benefit on our side that they never managed to respond to unless we count the op3 the response that we don't need uniformity, but I'll address that later. So what we explained here is that different judges with maybe great intentions, maybe they are really good people, they still have some human issues, like the fact that they have different values. Some of them are conservative, some of them are liberal, or the fact that judges become very emotional sometimes, like all humans do, which might skew their rationality, or the fact that offenders might be bad at expressing themselves if they come from a poor neighborhood, or they might be very well spoken and well educated, which means it's because they get I believe on every side of is that you have the same criminal with the same crime that can have different outcomes, different sentences from different judges. We don't believe this is acceptable. A fundamental principle of justice is that it's equal for everybody. Everyone is equal in front of the law. This is why uniformity was so important. We said this from the first speech. A third opposition that just says, oh, we don't care about uniformity any time. The same thing. The second avenue through which we win, racism and bias. We explained how these are mostly subconscious things. People have their own presuppositions. A judge might see a black person and think that they're more violent, or the judge might not. We believe that these biases are solved the moment that an algorithm comes in and doesn't have all these preconceptions that the people have, which means that we also solve bias and racism more on our side of the house. Their alternative with having more judges doesn't make them any less racist, doesn't make them any less biased. So we believe we win this point as well. Last thing, long-term change. So let's do all a favor and hypothetically assume that the other two avenues didn't already win us the debate. We also had a third argument in which we explained that first, we find out about issues faster, and secondly, we create accountability, which means long-term change, which means we win.
Okay, hello everyone. Just for confirmation, the debate already finished?
Yes, the debate just finished. I was about to text the Facebook chat.
Thank you for
Thank you so much. And thank you teams for a fantastic debate. We're looking forward to giving you some feedback afterwards.
Thank you, Becca, for the judges.
Thank you.